was actually impressed. That guy looks a lot like Columbo. I can see it. I was looking at pictures of him.
All right, we got to stop focusing on Columbo.
Okay, yeah.
He's like Benny with the spaceship.
Yeah.
Oh, so you guys don't want to talk about Columbo? Fine then. Just drop my notebook.
Yeah. All right. That's fine.
Guess we're not talking about Columbo? Okay.
Throws your notebook away.
Welcome to this edition of For the Love of the Frame. With you, as always, is Tim. And sitting here to my left is the second most highly regarded Proust scholar in this podcast,
Yep.
Ian.
That's me.
And I guess that makes you, Aaron, our preeminent Proust scholar in this podcast. So congratulations for that.
I would also love a bucket of chicken for dinner every day. Yeah. So I know what everyone was complaining about, but yes.
I'm glad I'm not the only one to fixate on that. I was like eyeballing the brand or the restaurant, trying to...
Yeah, what was the name of it? It had a funny name.
It wasn't KFC.
No, it was like... I think it was made up for the movie, but I can't remember the
Yeah, I
the
don't think I saw the name.
I guess we're breaching protocol here by going right in. We are here to talk about Little Miss Sunshine, in case it wasn't obvious about the brand of chicken at dinner. But Little Miss Sunshine, the 2006 film directed by Jonathan Dayton and Valerie Faris, written by, and we don't always say written by, but in this case, the movie won Best Original Screenplay at the Oscars that year. So written by a man named Michael Arndt, A-R-N-D-T. I am terrible at pronunciations. Who also wrote Toy Story 3. I was doing some little bit of research. At least contributed to The Force Awakens and one of the Hunger Game movies. I didn't really pay attention to the Hunger Games, but yeah, this is I think an interesting movie, and I wanted to go over the cast a little bit since we're talking about Oscars. This movie did win 2 Oscars. Most famously, won Best Supporting Actor for Alan Arkin, who played the grandpa. But looking over this cast, it really is a heavy hitter cast. You know, almost 15 plus years later. Steve Carell, who this was not before The Office, but before I think The Office was really a phenomenon. He plays Frank. Greg Kinnear plays the dad, Richard. Paul Dano.
I think it's
We'll go Dano.
I don't know. I don't know anything about actors.
Yeah, he plays Dwayne. Toni Collette. This is our second Toni Collette movie. I guess we're officially
This is a Toni Collette podcast?
Podcast, yeah. We're a Toni Collette fan club. She plays the mom, Cheryl. And then Abigail Breslin plays Olive, the little girl. Of those main 6, 5 of them are Oscar nominees. Who's the non-Oscar nominee? I want to put you on the spot. Who's the little pop quiz? You guys weren't ready for this pop quiz.
I read this earlier.
Does Steve Carell have it?
I don't know. Wait, hold on.
Come on.
I'm going to say... I know Paul Dano hasn't won one.
I'm getting tripped up because several of them have been in Oscar-nominated, like best
this is
pictures,
only nominee, not winning.
for acting.
A nominee for acting. I'm going to start humming the Jeopardy music in a second.
Is it Abigail Breslin?
All right, that's Ian's guess. Aaron?
I'll go Steve Carell.
Steve Carell? You are both incorrect.
Damn. Who was it?
So Abigail Breslin, what was she nominated for?
Oh, I have no idea. This one?
This movie. Abigail Breslin was nominated for this movie. Toni Collette, what was she nominated for?
I don't know a lot of movie trivia.
Okay.
So I'm going to be pretty bad at any of these.
I'll just go through the list.
Yeah, you should just
Toni
do it.
Collette was nominated for Sixth Sense. She's the best supporting actress in that one. Alan Arkin, as we mentioned, he won. He later won for Argo. He won again. Greg Kinnear was nominated for Best Supporting Actor for As Good as It Gets. And Steve Carell was nominated for Best Lead Actor in a movie that I watched and forgot about. It was called Foxtrot.
Foxcatcher,
Foxcatcher,
the wrestling.
thank you. Yeah, the wrestling movie. He kind of plays a weird.
I forgot about that movie.
It's a true story,
right?
Yeah, but he was nominated for Best Actor. So Paul Dano's the only one who.
Dang, man, I knew. Yeah. I should have stuck with.
But 5 out of 6, that's pretty good for a small movie. This was a small indie movie back in 2006. So.
With Bryan Cranston, in the background there.
Bryan Cranston lurking, pre-Breaking Bad Bryan Cranston. Yeah.
Who's he?
Walter White.
Oh, wait.
Malcolm in the Middle.
Who is he in this?
He's Lloyd Braun in Seinfeld. Or not Lloyd Braun.
The dentist.
Yeah. He's the,
The dentist in Seinfeld.
Shoot.
Yeah, I'm blanking. But in this movie, he is the book agent. He's trying to get the book deal for.
Yeah, he's Stan Grossman.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah. So Ian, since you're not into movie trivia, you're not into TV trivia or shows like Breaking Bad.
No.
What
I actually don't even like movies. I don't know why I'm here.
We can tell.
Yeah.
For Aaron and I, it's for the love of the frame. For Ian, it's
it's for the love of the criticism.
For the love of criticizing.
Anybody asks me to criticize anything, I'll be on their podcast.
Well, with that, before we dive in and analyzing more than just the fried chicken, which did look delicious. Yeah. Well, what are some initial impressions, Ian, that you had?
Yeah, I liked this a lot. We were talking earlier. I hadn't seen this. I don't know when I watched it, but it was probably pretty soon after it came out. So maybe like 2008, 2010, something like that. It was probably like 2008, I would say. So it's been a while, and I just didn't like it whenever I watched it. I just thought it was a movie about a bunch of horrible people doing horrible things, and I had zero sympathy for those people. And now I had a lot more sympathy, and it was definitely pretty moving watching it this time.
Do you think your sympathies were triggered due to, have you had any subsequent corpse removal experiences, or do you feel a little softer on that front? Is that what triggered it?
What did you say? Corpse removal?
Well, if you thought they were horrible people and then now you don't think they're horrible people, I'm wondering if maybe you related.
Yeah, I do think that I sympathize with them, or I feel more similar to them than I would like. Are
you like the grandpa? You're crazy to do this stuff when you're young. When you're old, you're crazy not to do it.
Yeah.
That's going to be a good thing to dive into. We're going to have another Ian therapy session.
Yeah. That's what I was hoping all of these would be.
Yeah, that's good.
But yeah, I liked it a lot. I thought it was good.
What about you, Aaron?
I definitely enjoyed a good dark comedy. It has a good balance of, I think, looking at everyday life and kind of people's deepest desires, but it just has these funny, humorous touches. And then there's a lot of great facial expression acting, like the way that people are reacting to things. And it's just very moving what they're communicating with not saying much. And then the chicken scene that we keep referring to, I just think it's an amazing scene, like the way that they are interacting with each other, conveying these emotions. It's funny. It's kind of just an accumulation of, I think, all the things that make this movie really good.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you say that, because I compiled a list of scenes I wanted to specifically talk about, and that was the first one. I also gravitated towards that scene. And but when I think of this movie, I remember seeing it roughly when it first came out. I definitely had an opinion that I wanted Alan Arkin to win the Oscar. He I was definitely in his corner for this performance back then. And I think I hadn't seen it since then, until I watched it in preparation for this episode. And I think what sticks with me, it's memorable, and they're very memorable characters. They're very well drawn. Like, even 15 years later, I remembered what that grandpa was like. I don't remember exactly everything he said, and parts of it feel dated. But it was just the spirit and vibe of that grandpa at the end of his life. Some of the advice he's doling out, and it just, it was a very humorous combination of like offensive and out there and unapologetic, but he also like loved his family in his own weird way. And it was a very multifaceted character, which I always appreciate. I'm a character guy. I love good characters. I love well-sketched characters. I think the other thing, looking back, this movie was ahead of its time in identifying just how creepy kid pageants are.
Yeah.
I had no way of knowing. I didn't look it up, but that Toddlers and Tiara show, or like, I feel like all those weird channels have these creepy, you know, and not to, I guess, I don't know anyone, so I don't care if I offend anyone, but like kid pageants are weird, man.
Kid beauty pageants, yeah, they're super weird.
And this movie just really, it almost like shoves it in front of you with like a, what the F kind of, what is this? And let's just join together and these things exist. And
well, did you read the thing that apparently all the girls besides the
Abigail Breslin,
besides her, all of them were real beauty pageant.
Oh, I did not find that hard to believe.
They did, like, they dressed the same way in their actual competitions, and they did their same talents.
It's creepy.
That was like a real beauty pageant, basically.
Yeah, and I think those shows subsequently, like, it actually is a thing.
Yeah.
You know, not my subculture, but it exists and it's a thing. And
it's pretty scary.
Yeah. Yeah. And I saw, I think one of the things I read, like they had her wearing like a fat suit.
Oh yeah.
Which we can talk about the ice cream too.
That was
my list.
That was pretty rough. But I had the same thing where it was funny because I would have said, whenever I watched this, I didn't like it. My like unnuanced Jungian didn't like it, but I remembered some of the scenes really well. Like I could have told you exactly what was going to happen. And then whenever I watched them, it was like, yeah, that's what happened. And same thing where there were some details, but for the most part, it is a really memorable movie. Maybe it's just because there's so much random weird stuff happening, but like,
like remembering Paul Dano is basically a mute.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
that's stuck in my head 15 years later.
Oh yeah,
I didn't remember.
Never forget it. Yeah,
yeah.
I knew that like going in without having looking anything up. Yeah,
and Steve Carell playing a mostly like straight laced character. It wasn't crazy Michael Scott character, and just him being that. It is funny looking, like some of his mannerisms are the same. Yeah. And like when he dances at the end, it feels very Michael Scott. Right. Kind of like blurring of what's acting and what's just you being you.
That's just how he dances.
That's just how he dances. Yeah. But yeah, I wanted to, I feel like because collectively the three of us have a little less familiarity with this one, compared to at least the prior two episodes, I thought it would be, rather than just shooting from the hip and just talking about the movie from like a global perspective, going into some scenes and maybe dissecting together what's going on, what resonated with us, what we saw, and then work our way through, and then maybe sum up some of the overarching themes.
That sounds good.
And so the first one was what Aaron mentioned earlier, the dinner scene. I loved that scene. To me, it really set the tone for the movie. It helped you really feel the family. And I just wanted to kick it to you guys. Maybe start with you, Aaron, since you also resonated with this. Besides the chicken, and I feel like we've covered the chicken. But what else about that scene like really helped set the stage for you as far as understanding the characters?
I think it introduces you to each of their desires. Yeah. The mom, she just really cares about, I think, this family being together, the way that they're relating to one another. Cheryl. Richard, he's just really locked into this book deal. He's this motivational speaker, winners versus losers. And it's interesting to see the disconnect between, you see him at this like seminar with a handful of people, and he's passionate, but there doesn't seem to be much of a connection between like what he kind of preaches and his real life. It's almost like a vehicle just for him to become successful. And then you have Grandpa, he's at the end of his life. He's been kicked out of his retirement home for lewd behavior of all types. You've got Dwayne and Olive. And Dwayne, do we get introduced to the idea that he wants to be a pilot this early?
I think so, yeah. It is, yeah.
Okay, but he's taken the vow of silence. He's I never pronounced the name correctly. Nietzsche. Yeah. He's in the Nietzsche's philosophy, and then you've got Olive. She's all about this pageant.
Mm-hmm. And Frank, did you talk about Frank?
Yeah. Oh, Frank, the brother.
Yeah.
Yep.
Steve Carell.
Yeah.
You want to say anything about him?
Yeah, he's a professor who's heartbroken.
Anything stand out to you?
Yeah, I mean, I had pretty much the same thing. I felt like I wrote down just kind of like, I guess their character types are kind of like their archetypes of who I felt like they are. And yeah, you get it all in that scene, in that very first scene, which is really, but it doesn't feel like they're hitting you over the head with it. It's just, it feels like a family. Cause I think you can do that with most families. I mean, if you go into just any time whenever a whole family is interacting, I think that you can tell. I mean, people show their personalities pretty quick. So I think that it felt real, where you can just walk in and you get the vibe pretty quick, and you can tell like who's doing what and kind of why they're doing it. Which, yeah, I thought was really well done.
Yeah, and even the setting, right? Like the wood paneling in the house, and it was cluttered, like toys and blankets kind of in the background. It's very unkempt and strewn, but very lived in, and exactly what you think that kind of family that's throwing a bucket of chicken on the floor, and the grandpa, just the way they're scattered. Using paper plates, and then everyone's got to use a little bit of salad.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
I know. Crappy iceberg lettuce. But it's like what a mom in that situation is going to be saying, and they're drinking their Sprite and all that.
Sprite. Right. Yeah. She's like, let me get everybody a Sprite.
Yeah. Some other observations. I always go out of my way to try to take note of the very opening and very closing of movies. It's usually the opening statement and closing statement. And so the very beginning of this movie is Olive looking at the recording, or the I guess a VCR, whatever it was, a recording of a beauty pageant, watching that acceptance, and that just something about pageants that are just so supremely fake. Yeah. And the girl, creepy, winning, that plastic smile and that crown and the shriek and the everything. And you see Abigail Abigail's the actress's name, Olive, absorbing that and mimicking it, and it's that setting the stage for that. And you do see, and Aaron, you touched on it, but you get these little vignettes or snapshots of why each of them is desperately unhappy and unfulfilled. And so you see, Richard with, if beauty pageants are pathetic, we're full of hot takes today.
We're just gonna, I don't know if that's that much of a hot take.
Thank you, Ian.
If you think that is, then
we'll have to set up like a mailbox for the angry fan letters, all the hate mail.
Yeah.
Email Ian.
Any press is good press. That's what I always say. It's all about those clicks.
I feel good being on that ground. Beauty pageants are creepy.
Yeah.
Motivational speakers are in the same circle.
Yeah.
And it's that desperation of like, he kind of genuinely believes it, but he's also selling it.
Right.
And what Aaron, you said is, he believes it and he's selling it. And even the way they shot that scene, because it's focused on him.
Yeah. Right.
And it's Greg Kinnear. He's a professional actor. He's crushing it. He's charismatic. He, looks like an actor. It's very compelling.
He's all in.
And he's all in. And you're expecting it, just the way that it's shot and the backlit, that, he's talking to some audience. And then when you see the reveal that it's like 4 people in a classroom and they tepid applause, and he's still beaming like he's...
Right.
He's performing, he's laying it out there, and it's that disconnect of everything he's saying doesn't match the life he's living, or, and that's clever storytelling, right?
I want to just real quick, you were talking about the beginning scene is that it is like the pageant, but then it also, the very first thing that I think they say is that they won like $30,000 for a scholarship. And I think that kind of like that, money doesn't come into it a ton, but like you were saying, you see their house, you see their lives, and they do talk about money throughout of it, like that it is a problem. But it's interesting, I think, seeing it from Olive's perspective, because I think kids are normally like that, where like if parents are stressed about something, because Olive never talks about money during the whole thing, but you kind of, I mean, what I took out of the first scene is that that's why she's doing it. Like she does like it and she likes the dancing and whatever, but I think she has in her head like, okay, this is how I'm going to help out, or this is how I'm going to like get out of here, or, you know, be able to take care of myself. And which is, I really liked Olive a lot. She was really sweet. And just even that first scene where you see the fakeness, but then whenever she's doing it, it's just really cute. And like, you just really feel for her. Even in the very first scene, whenever she's like doing the fake wave thing. And yeah, but it's just sad because she's stuck in this really dysfunctional family. And they really rely on her to be, to be like the sunshine. That's what I wrote down Little for Miss her, Sunshine. Is that she is the sunshine. Yeah. Whoa. Yeah. Wow. So deep.
Well, she is. She's the picture in the, I guess the note in the film of this uncorrupted, or she's who she is. And I love the subtlety. Like they always dress her up. You know, I mentioned before, like the actress wore like a small fat suit, but they made sure she didn't look like the the creepy pageant girls and the real life pageant girls at the end with the primped hair. And, you know, she's wearing like a sweatband around and like those weird cowgirl boots. And like, she just is like, she's herself. And she is that age where you're blissfully unaware of external. You know, she was visiting her cousins. It sounds like they just entered her into a beauty contest, and she, you know, just finished second. You know, it was not a thing that she trained for, and then she just got bit by the bug the way kids that age do, and that was her thing, and so she did it every day. And her grandpa was retired and had time, and her coach. Obviously, her coach. You get what you pay for, I suppose, right? But it's just funny because she was never going to be a beauty pageant winner. And you don't have to be deep in the world of kid beauty pageants or having, you know, some fanatic viewer of Toddlers and Tiaras or whatever to know like that kid that's not a beauty pageant kid or that's not the look. But it's what she wanted to do. And that's what made that dinner scene interaction with Richard, the dad, when they finally decided to go, and he's just like, we're not going to go unless you think you can win. That fake power, positive thinking, whatever, like self-help guru thing. And, you know, you have to believe it. And it's just like,
it's out of touch.
Yeah. It's completely out of touch. But that's an example of an exterior pressure being placed on this girl, you know, she didn't really perceive it necessarily that way. Well, now I'm talking about it, I'm like whipping myself up. But because later on in the hotel, she's crying to Grandpa, am I a loser? Am I going to be, you know,
it definitely affects her,
Yeah. That what he did in that dinner scene, those seeds came sprouted, you know, at the hotel. Yeah. I think there's so much in that, but I feel like I've seen families that rely on the children like that, like especially if there's one kid who's like really cute and just kind of energetic and everything, where you kind of just place all of the, I don't know what you would call it, but like almost all of the social expectations or just all of the hope on the family on them, and you play off of them. So every conversation will kind of revolve around them. And I don't know, it's an interesting thing because it shows, I think, the power of children, and it shows the power of innocence and just the power of something that is seemingly really, it's like she's the least powerful person, right, in the room, but in this weird way, I think she actually has the most power, and she really drives what the family, everything that the family wants. Like she's the only one who can get through to every one of them in a different way, because they all have their clashes, but she has a special relationship with each of them. And I think that's a really interesting idea, because not to bring like the gospel part of it in too early, but it is interesting because it's a picture of something that's really weak becoming really strong. And it's something, I guess that's it. There's a Chesterton quote about that I really, really like a lot. It's in one of my favorite books by him. And it's just about how it's actually the
the things that are really common. Like it's children, it's like marriage, it's being a mother, being a father, it's friendship. Those are the things that we keep going back to. Like we're kind of pressing forward in this progressive, like the next new and better thing. But at the end of the day, those aren't really what we want. What we actually want are the things that are as old as everything, as creation, as humans, which is just like relationships, and it's like creating a family. And I think that's a really interesting idea. I've always thought that was a really interesting idea. And I felt like they did that well in this movie without really, it doesn't hit you over the head with it or anything, but yeah.
No, it's good. And I'm not trying to spin our wheels here or do too much here, but it's such a great introduction.
Yeah.
And so I feel like we've done a good job of looking at Abigail. I keep doing that. Olive. And we've looked at Richard, and I think to an extent we've looked at Grandpa. It feels almost remiss not to carry the thread through and just do like a little character reflection on Frank and then also Dwayne. Like what do we see that makes them tick? Where are they? What's the source of their discontent and unhappiness? Why are they deeply unhappy people? And in how we see that coming out. And so, I don't know. Do you want to start with Frank? Anyone have a beat on that?
Something I thought was interesting in this movie is the character pairs.
Yeah.
And so you've got Frank and Dwayne, you've got Olive and Grandpa, and then you've got Cheryl and Richard. Yeah. So we've kind of talked through the other two pairs. And with Frank and Dwayne, the way that I see them paired, and the interesting dynamic in the pair is like there's usually one of the pair who has like real lived experience of something, and then the other one who's kind of like idealistic about that same kind of desire, but hasn't like really been hurt yet. So you've got like the thing with Frank and Dwayne is, they both like, their deepest desire is kind of like this one thing that will, because like Frank, he's an accomplished guy. He calls himself the foremost Proust scholar.
Ian's got something to say about
that.
And so he appears to be an accomplished guy, and it didn't seem like there's not much else that's introduced in his life that went wrong besides this relationship, which affected him deeply. The rejection, the pain of that loss of having someone who he deeply cared for choose someone else. And then in the dinner scene, Dwayne, he hasn't experienced loss yet, but he is putting his hope in like this one thing. It's like all his eggs are in that basket, and that's what's going to bring meaning and value to life. So he wants to be a pilot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I guess they go through, because Olive asks what happened to his wrist, to Frank's wrist, and so then they go through that whole. They kind of talk through a little bit of that, so you get a lot of his story in that scene. And yeah, it is really interesting because I feel like you get a lot of you do get kind of that pairing, because there's certain parts where Richard's talking and Frank looks at Dwayne and he's like, right. Is he always like this? Like, how do you how do you stand this? Like, right. And he already is like condescending towards Richard, and they're bonding, even if it's just a little bit. There is a little bit of the right. bonding there. And I mean, and so Frank has his stuff going on. I also just think Dwayne is an interesting name. I don't know why, but it's just kind of a funny love that name. Yeah, Dwayne. But I thought he was a really interesting character, because you can see he has some insight, like he can kind of tell what's going on around him, but he doesn't really have the experience. And so he has no sympathy for his parents. He right. is completely unsympathetic. Like he sees that, well, I guess it's his stepdad. I was reading something. Yeah.
There's a small comment in the dinner scene where, I don't remember the exact comment, but it basically, you can infer that That's not his dad.
Yeah.
I didn't catch that. Interesting.
Yeah.
I read something about it. But then whenever he kind of has his breakdown, he says he says like divorce to his mom.
He did. That's right.
Which didn't make sense except for then I read that and I was like, oh, that makes sense. But yeah, I like that. I mean, even that part is really subtle, but it does add, once you put that together, it adds that their relationship is even that more estranged.
Right.
And so he can kind of see, he looks at Richard, he sees who he is, he sees he's doing this whatever refuse to lose thing, but it's like Richard's kind of a loser.
He's kind of a loser, yeah.
Right. And so he sees that and that makes him angry, and then he looks at his mom, and I think he does respect his mom, he does love his mom, but at the same time, like, you know, she just has a hard time keeping everything together, and just all the stuff that we were talking about like the chicken and the lettuce, and there's something sad about their lives, and I think he can sense that.
Yeah.
But, and then he has, he's like, he was reading Nietzsche, and he's, you know, so he has these high-minded, and I think you see that in a lot of young men, like, where they have these ideals. I'm just going to keep referencing stuff so that it sounds like I'm smart.
When you say young men, are you talking about yourself?
Yeah. No, I'm old now.
Did you not like this movie because you identified with Dwayne too much?
No.
Are you colorblind?
Maybe I liked it because
are you colorblind?
Yeah. I haven't taken a test, so I don't know. But I am going to fly a jet one day. Yeah. No, I'm not young anymore, Aaron. I'm on the should be doing heroin side of things now.
Welcome to the grandpa side.
Yeah. No, but I think there's a Flannery O'Connor short story that I really like, where you get this younger guy, and he's talking to his mom, and he's this more learned guy, and his mom isn't educated, and he's really looking down on her, and you kind of see, like, he's not wrong necessarily about what his family's doing. And that's how I feel about Dwayne, is that I kind of feel the same way about his parents that he does. But at the same time, I think just being a little older, I have more sympathy for them. Where it's like, I understand how you could end up like that and be in that spot.
He's being insufferable.
Bro, you're right. Yeah, he's being totally insufferable. Yeah. Nobody who reads Nietzsche and then takes a vow of silence is gonna nobody likes that guy for
when he
very good reason.
On his pad to Frank, like, please don't kill yourself today.
Right. Yeah. And I think the first time you see him pull out his little notepad, he just writes, I hate everybody.
He underlines everybody.
Yeah, and he's like,
because he asked him, he's like, even your family, and he underlines everybody.
Yeah. And so, he's being insufferable, but at the same time, you see where he's coming from, and I think that's really well done, and it feels true to me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to add much more. Like, you really get the sense of they're struggling financially. You get the sense that they're each pursuing their own individual ways of pursuing happiness and feeling complete, and are just desperately unhappy. And the mom's really the glue figure. Yeah. You don't get as much of a picture of her desperation or her unhappiness, other than everyone around her is doing their own thing, and she's trying to hold everyone together, which is exhausting in its own way. And just how much on different wavelengths they are. Like, you see mom and dad, like when it came to Frank and Olive asking about his injury. Mom's all about transparency. Dad's, this is inappropriate. You just see this dynamic where they just aren't on the same wavelength, and that's repeated a bunch, but also something you find in families. Yeah. So there's this relatability, but then this way of, it's a little extreme, or, I don't have a Proust scholar in my family who, some of it's a little out there, but
not everybody's pulling their dead grandpa out of the window of a hospital. And
so I wanted to, I know we got to move on, but if we can understand this movie essentially in three parts, there's that intro setting up the characters, dinner scene piece, and then there's the journey on the bus, and then there's the pageant. So I wanted to transition to looking at that middle part. So just from when they get on the bus to, I guess, when they first land or kind of crash the bus into the hotel to register for the pageant. In that section, just as you guys think over that, I guess, what are some things we learn, or, put that on the back burner. I did want to, because I thought it deserves a little bit of attention. the ice cream scene in the diner. Just what's going on there? What do we learn? How is the film advancing what we learned in that dinner scene and bringing it forward and developing it more? Aaron,
you want to go first?
Yeah, so Olive wants some pancakes a la mode, which I've actually never heard of. So I'm
for under $4.
For under,
I know.
That was the most shocking thing.
I was like, anything under $4. What is,
I thought that, but then when they walk out of the restaurant on the window, they have steak dinner, $4.99. Yeah, so I'm like, okay, New Mexico, I guess.
Find that restaurant.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the road act in general is where the cracks start to emerge in each of their desires. Like each thing that they want, their desires are taking heavy hits on the road, and it's kind of even symbolized by the bus itself breaking down. It can only start in third gear. They have to push start it. Like, but in this lunch scene, Olive does up to this point she's primarily had like you mentioned with the dinner scene with chicken, Richard does, he puts this like, you're a winner, we're only doing this if you think you can win, but this is kind of the first time where you see the cracks start to emerge for her, where he's telling her this kind of like body image stuff and what ice cream does to her body, and you see, it's one of the first times where you see her like, kind of like dented, or kind of like not Little Miss Sunshine, and the family sees that and they kind of rally around her and pick her up, kind of playing funny about the ice cream, by eating her ice cream, and and she kind of pops back to life. It's a quick downturn for her, but then she's back. And so yeah, I think that's one of the main things I got out of this scene. It's where you first see her dreams of this, this like she's had a very like kind of innocent, cute, like orientation towards this pageant life. And even with her dad saying like, you have to be a winner, it still doesn't seem to affect her like in that moment. She's still very like idealistic about it. And this is the first time where she's kind of introduced to the idea, like, I might not be good enough for this. I might not be cut out for this,
Yeah, and one of the things that I was thinking is just the support that you see from the rest of her family. And I think it comes together a little bit later on, but it does feel like there's a disconnect between Richard and the rest of the family. Like everybody else feels a little bit more sympathetic than he does. And maybe it's just because he's more about his thing and he's more driven. Everybody else is willing to drop their things at different points. But it's an interesting, at least for me, he was the least sympathetic character. And he has moments, especially at the end, where he kind of comes around, but yeah, especially like that scene, it's hard to forgive that maybe, because it is so powerful. What he's saying to her that's something that sticks with kids. And
well, to me, it's such an interesting scene because stripped of all context, strictly speaking, he's right.
Right, yeah. Uh-huh.
Broadly speaking, everything that he said is, I'm not saying no beauty queen ever can eat ice cream, but the principle of having to watch what you eat, or you have to sacrifice in order to look a certain way. And he's just like, Olive Honey, the ones who win, are they, after the mom's like, you can be fat or skinny or whatever you want. He's like, well, and he's right. But it's also, you hate him for saying it because it's wildly inappropriate for a girl Olive's age. And it's this picture of how, if we were saying Little Miss Sunshine, or, Olive's in some ways the character untainted by the awareness of the expectations of the world that foist on her. You see, part of it is just the obliviousness of youth, and part of it is, I think, adults and family members are just, we have a desire to shelter children from some of the cold, harsh realities of the world. And they're true realities, but there's something about just enjoying your childhood and enjoying the ability to eat ice cream for breakfast. And, she's not unhealthily, is that even a word? She's not an unhealthy or
it's a scoop of ice cream.
Yeah, right. And she's not, you know, a 400-pound 8-year-old or something, right? Like at most she's a little chubby, but not, you know, in a way that's you really need for her, the good of her health to shield her from that. And it's just interesting seeing very little of the family is aligned on anything except hating him in that moment. Mm-hmm. You know, and you don't see them all line up, all in finding ways of undermining what Richard's saying, you know, in supporting. And I think it triggers something when you love kids or are looking for their well-being to try to shelter them from the cold, harsh realities of the world, which Richard is the voice of in this way.
Yeah. And they do it so spontaneously too. Right. Like they do it so quick and they just jump on it and they're all on the same page. And yeah, it's one of that is, I think, one of the sympathetic things about them. And one of the beautiful parts of the movie is you do see them come together as a family sometimes. And you do see them love each other, even if it's ways that is kind of broken.
Even the way that they're pushing the van, the bus, the order that they kind of work. It's very considerate of one another. It's they all respect the order. You don't really see too many people fighting it. But that theme of like the outside pressures of the world, I think it's definitely one of the threads of this movie. You've got Grandpa we've already joked about it, but just with his heroin use, you know, and he's telling Dwayne, he's like, you're crazy to do this when you're young, but you're crazy not to do it when you're old. It's that same concept of like the world. It tries to, and when the same thing when Grandpa's telling Dwayne, like, you know, sleep with as many women as you can. Like, it's the same idea of like the world. It's gonna try and put you in this box, and it's not like there's no in the idea of like winners and losers. Like, who's a winner, who's a loser. It's almost like the movie's trying to say, like, you're only a loser if you like confine yourself to this box and you conform to like the kind of these outside pressures that exist and are trying to tell you how to live your life. Seems to be one of the main threads of this movie.
Yeah, a lot of the motivation is very external. If you go through the list of what they want, a lot of it is some external thing, and it's some version of. It's a version of success that I think most people is kind of widely accepted as a version of success. So like Frank, he wants to be the number one Proust or however you say that scholar, right? And he wants to have his book recognized, and he wants to get the scholarship or the Genius Grant, and he wants to have the relationship. And then you have Richard, who just wants to make money and, you know, be successful and be looked at, and you can kind of go down the list of all that.
Yeah, and so as the journey across New Mexico and into California takes place, some of these characters taste failure, right? So if Olive in that ice cream scene is bumping up against that cold reality, and I just have to shoehorn this in because I wrote it. When Richard also says, "Don't apologize; it's a sign of weakness."
Yeah, that's a good line.
And the other one, when they're driving and he's talking about his 9-step thing, and Frank's picking at him, and he says, "Sarcasm's the refuge of the losers. Sarcasm is losers trying to bring winners down to their level." Right. That's step 4 of the program. I'm glad that's not true. It better not be true.
Yeah, that's definitely not true.
It can't be true. Anyway, I got that out of my system. As the bus goes on, we see a scene where Frank finds humiliation at the gas station, where he runs into, I guess, his former crush or relationship, or I don't know exactly how developed that relationship was, but he's buying inappropriate magazines and you know, getting a slushie, which for a guy like that, you know, and you can see he's actually light when he's interacting with Grandpa. Right. He's sort of embraced, you know, this road trip thing and is leaving some of the troubles behind and is in some ways healing a little bit, or you know, whatever drove him to attempt suicide, you know, he's enjoying it a little. He's lightening a little. Yeah. And then he runs into that, and it's all the rushing back of the inadequacy and the unmet longings, and you know, it brings him back to that. And then we see, obviously later on, well, in an ultimate sense, Grandpa passes. And then we see with Dwayne, the revelation that he's colorblind and can't, won't be able to be a pilot in the U.S. Air Force. And so maybe, and you guys feel free to key in on whatever you want, but looking at these pictures of failure or humiliation or, inadequacy, whatever you want to use the word, where does that push along the story, or like, what is the meaning? Why are these things in the movie? What's it showing us?
That's a good question.
Is that too shrouded of a question?
No. Yeah. It's just, I think there's just a lot in it. I mean, I'll just say first, I really liked the scene with Frank because, I mean, in a lot of ways, it's not relatable. I don't want to, paint myself into a corner here. But it is relatable, just that the unexpectedness of it. Yeah. And the way that he's kind of just rolling, and you can tell he does feel a little bit better. And I'm sure his world before was academic and full of a lot of pressures, and he had to be somebody, and, he had to be smart all the time. And there's a lot of people that crack under that. So and he did for a few different reasons, but he did kind of end up cracking and all that. And so, like you were saying, I do think he was enjoying himself, but then to have all of that hit you in the middle of nowhere at a gas station while you're like buying this stuff that he's super ashamed of, and he doesn't look good. Just all of that. For some reason, I feel like I related to that to some degree of just being taken off guard and then not being able to react the way that you want to react. That it's just relatable. Yeah.
And it's showing, if he was in a bubble completely unaware that other people existed, he was happy.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it isn't until caring about somebody else's opinion popped that bubble of happiness and brought all the humiliation and the bad feelings. Like, all because he wants to impress this former student of his, or, he sees the guy in the fancy car, his rival, or his, Proust antagonist, grappling for Proust's supremacy. And so it's by caring about the external and their opinions, it robs him of his own happiness. And when he was unaware, so it's almost like if he was more like Olive.
Yeah. It takes him back that innocence.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No. I completed my thought.
Okay.
I was more just like, dang, Tim, that was a good point you just made.
Better update the scoreboard.
Yeah. Ding.
Ding. Just tabulating here in my head.
We all need a different sound whenever we score a point.
And all our voices just be drowned out by the different sounds constantly.
Yeah, but it does. I like the idea of looking at this movie, not completely, but to some degree of just Olive, like bringing them all back to a type of innocence that is different than what the world tells them that they want, but at the same time is better than that because they enjoy it more. And I like that idea a lot.
Yeah, which I guess to answer the question, what you're saying, Ian, like the second act, like on the road, it's like an act of disillusionment. They're all seeing the kind of inadequacies and like frailties of what they were deeply desiring.
And I think they're starting to discover the ways that the smaller things can be really enjoyable. Like I was thinking, this hit me whenever I was watching it, and you kind of brought it up with them starting the car and then like jumping in the same order. Whenever they first do that, they start off and they're like, okay, the clutch broke, like we have to push the car now. But then by the time they all get in the car, they're all laughing.
Yeah.
And that's super relatable to me too, because a lot of times it's the things that, it's like the snowpocalypse from last year or whenever. Like there's these things that happen that are really inconvenient and wouldn't be something that you would choose. But a lot of times those are the things that create these interactions that are actually the most meaningful in life. And so I feel like I'm sounding really like guru-y right now. That's everything that I've said about
It comes with age.
this movie. Yeah, maybe it's because I'm so smart now. That's probably why. I feel like I'm saying a lot about just like friendship and like family and whatever, like kind of flowery. But I mean, it creates these unexpected interactions that they actually really enjoy, and I don't know, that's relatable to me too. I think that's why I like this movie so much, is it feels so relatable, of just these tiny little circumstances that they get into. And
so let's pull that idea but move it into the meltdown scene when Dwayne finds out that he's colorblind. He starts wailing on the van, and they pull over, and he just breaks his vow of silence very dramatically, runs down the bank. And I don't know, I think Aaron, you brought it up earlier, but just, we've been focusing on Olive and just her role in the family and in the movie. Like, what do you see in her response? What Dwayne says when he's lashing out, and then what Olive ultimately does, and how that moves things forward.
This is confession time. I think I actually fell asleep in this part. I vaguely remember it from like 16 years ago, but I'm gonna need an assist here.
All right, fair enough.
This is my confession time. I watched the movie right before this because I have really bad time management skills, so it is very fresh for me. Yeah, he kind of blows up. I also, confession, I was writing something down while you were asking that question to Aaron, so I didn't hear all of it. But
well, then I
do have something to say though.
Yeah, so he melts down. He runs. He starts screaming. Mom goes down there, and he bites her head off.
Right.
He basically calls his whole family losers. He says divorce, bankrupt to dad, suicide to Frank. You're all losers. And Mom just retreats back up, and they're up against the clock. They're very tight, and he either gets back in that van and they can barely make it, or they're going to miss the whole thing with Olive. But it's also, he took it as, was it 9 months or so of silence, or however, a long time.
It was like 400 something days.
Yeah, it was a long time, right? And it all broke. It was a huge deal for him. And so Mom's back up, and the whole family is standing by the side of the road. And I think they were resigned to, hey, this is the end of the road here. We got a dead grandpa in the back. And we gave it our best shot. And Richard, in classic Richard, kind of oblivious way, just turns to Olive, and it's just like, why don't you try talking to him? And so she goes down, and so
and then she just sits there. She just sits next to him and like kind of puts her head on his shoulder and like gives him a little hug. And then he just gets up and says like, okay, it's time to go. And it's just another picture of the love, and because he doesn't need anybody to come say anything to him, or I mean, there's nothing that anybody really can say, but just there's something about the innocence of a child and just like the warmth that's there. Well, and I think he also remembers that he's trying, like, she doesn't say anything of like blaming him or like, oh, we came all this way, I need to get to my beauty pageant or anything like that. She genuinely cares about him. I mean, Olive, from everything that you know about Olive, like, I think she would have just sat with him for however long, which is really sweet.
We can kind of develop it more, I guess, down the line, but it reminds me of what you were getting at with your Chesterton idea of, I guess, more than a few minutes ago.
Yeah, a while ago.
So let's, not trying to accelerate too much, but I know just time-wise, I don't want this to be a 2-hour podcast, but moving into the third part of the pageant, which honestly, I feel like the biggest point of most of it was, guys, look how creepy kid pageants are. That's the main takeaway I got from the vast majority of the last 40 minutes of the movie. But wanting to focus us on, because I do think one of the key scenes of the whole film is when Frank and Dwayne go out on the pier. They're suffocating in the pageant, and they go and they're out on the water, and it's Frank is talking about Proust. You know, he's the foremost Proust scholar, and
I love how he keeps saying that whenever whenever they're pushing the bus. That's one of the best reoccurring bits that they have in this.
And he just says that Proust was a total loser, never had a real job, 20 years of writing a book that nobody reads. But when he was at the end of his life, he wrote that as he looked back, it was his years of suffering that made him who he was, and that you actually need suffering. Because I think Dwayne was saying, basically, put me in a coma and wake me at 18 when I can like go and live on, you know. And then Dwayne says, life is one effing beauty contest after another. And, you know, you just need to do what you love and F the rest. You know, and it's basically, I'll find a way to fly the Air Force. I'll find another way. And so, I don't know, I just wanted to, and maybe we can spend more time there when we talk about the overall message of the movie, but I wanted to at least hit that and then go to the very end of the movie, which is kind of iconic, right? It's, you know, yeah. I don't know. Does someone want to set it up or?
Go ahead, Ian.
Just like her performing.
Yeah, well, no, I don't need a play-by-play of every.
Yeah, I feel like I don't want to be the one to do.
Someone's got to say.
We're already having people email Ian for complaints.
Yeah.
No, but I guess just the I'll just go ahead and I'll keep rolling. The pageant, they do a great job of making you feel there and the awkwardness and how serious the pageant people were taking it and how fish out of water their whole family is, but especially Olive. She does not look like them. She does not act like them. There's a lot of money and resources that are going into having these girls look this way and act this way and be coached this way. And Olive is just blissfully unaware. She wants to do it and she's convinced and so they start and then there's the pageant and just the way they're dressed. Olive stands out in a very negative way. And, you know, they do their different questions or walking around, all the different pageant stuff. And she just is a fish out of water. She does not, you know, and that growing sense of dread. There's a scene where they're in the dressing room and, you know, Frank maybe not Frank, but Dwayne and the dad, they all start independently coming and being like, we cannot let her perform. Like she's going to humiliate herself. And it's this picture of adults being aware of what others think and being influenced by what others think and fearing what others think. And it's in the same way that in the ice cream, they were trying to shelter her. I think this is also this protective impulse. But mom's there to say, like, this is what she wants. This is what she's been working for. We can't pull this away from her. And so they ultimately allow her to go. And it's this very, you know, high-minded or self-serious pageant. And she does a kid version, like grandpa, the whole routine they've been practicing was basically like a stripper routine. Sounds awful. And if you haven't seen the movie, trust me, it's not as creepy as it sounds, but it's, but you know, she's doing it and she doesn't know it's that.
Right.
Like you're kind of in the audience, you're in on the joke and you know how grandpa is. So it totally fits that he, you know, and it's just the kind of guy he was and just the way he was doing it because he wasn't in the pageant world, right? So he taught what he knew, I guess. And you just see the horror on all the judges and all the competitors. Some competitors walk out and then they try to shut it down and she just keeps going and she's doing her thing. And you see the horror on the family members and they're looking around. But she's unsinkable and she's not put off by them and she keeps going and then they try to pull her off the stage and the dad goes and he gets into a fight with the MC and it all ends with them all dancing, you know, on the stage and sort of, you know, we don't care what the rest of y'all think. And by the way, y'all are creepy anyway. And, you know, and so I think that's just that's the movie's closing statement. I think that's the tie that brings all the threads together, which is why maybe I spent some time to really set it up. And so maybe here, like what are your what's the movie overall saying? And by all means, you know, you can add if I didn't hit on something you wanted to hit on, but yeah. What'd you think, Ian?
Yeah, I don't know. I was trying to think about that on the way over here because, again, I didn't have a ton of time to
Prepare better next time.
Yeah,
Come on.
I do need to prepare better next time. Well, I'm just doing what I want to do, Tim, and I won't be swayed by the influences of the world telling me.
You are wearing
cowboy
boots that seem a little age inappropriate.
Wow, that's not true, everybody.
That's what someone wearing cowboy boots would say on a podcast.
Wow. Dang it. I'm wearing something really cool right now. Just picture me in the coolest thing that you can think of. Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know. I think it's saying a lot of stuff, but to some degree it is just like, it's kind of a slice of life thing where it's not, there is kind of this crazy stuff happening, but I do think it's more just about the characters and how they're developing through it. And I think there's a lot that you can pull out of it. I like the innocence take on it. Like, I really like and I don't think that's like a complete answer to everything, but I do like the idea that like the innocence of a child is really, really powerful. Mm-hmm. And even with the last scene, it is really weird. Like, it's really sad. And that was one of the things that stuck with me the first time I watched it, was like, they're going to do this whole thing and you have this really sweet girl. And then the whole time you realize that like the whole time her grandpa was teaching her this like strip thing. And it's just, hey, like, I just couldn't handle it. I was like, this is horrible. Like, this is so horrible. And I think I felt some of that this time, because there is something really bad about that.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's funny, but it all, and the way they do it's funnier than it seems like it would be. Yeah. But there's something really bad about it, but then at the same time, her innocence and her like childlike enthusiasm, or I guess her just childish enthusiasm, it really like, it kind of wins over that, because whenever she's doing it, you can tell she's just having fun. Like, she's just dancing. She doesn't know what any of the stuff is, and she's just dancing and she's having a good time, and it kind of like breaks like anything that it could have been. It's not. It's just like a kid dancing and doing it and having fun. And so I like that take on it. And I do think there's a lot about just family and, relationships and prioritizing those things instead of like trying to get rich or trying to, be the number one Proust scholar in the world, whatever. And because those things are fine and those things are good, but at the end of the day, like, there's just something about relationships that is really meaningful, and I think it's what we all want.
You keep working at it, you'll overtake Aaron for number one in this podcast.
Yeah, we'll see. I think the first thing would be figuring out how to pronounce his name, because I definitely don't know that right now. I mean, I did think it's kind of the throwaway line, but just he spent 20 years writing something that nobody...
Right.
And it's funny because you have people at universities studying this guy, right? But at the same time, it's like, who actually reads that? And I feel like there's a lot of stuff like that where we revere something, but then at the end of the day, wasn't that another... That was in Knives Out, where Gravity is Rainbow. Yeah. And she's like, yeah, it's a book, but I haven't read it. And he's like, yeah, nobody's read it. But the point is that the name sounds really good. Yeah. And there is kind of this funny idea of the things that we revere, a lot of times we don't actually like them enough to do them or to interact with them. We just know that we should revere them. And so I think I don't think that's a main thing, but it is interesting. And the different places that people get hope from, like you see Frank, I mean, him telling Dwayne to go out and live, on the pier, and like, hey, things aren't that bad. Like, it's pretty light. And I think Frank definitely isn't as dark as he could be, like, coming out of an attempted suicide. But that's what the movie opens up with, basically, is him. He just tried to kill himself. So the fact that he's telling his nephew there, hey, like, even though things are hard, it's still worth it, and all this stuff. Like, that's a big deal. That's a big deal for him to be saying that. And just the way that he's cutting up with him, and the relationship that you see that's grown there is... it's cool. So I don't know. That wasn't very coherent, but there's a lot of little things.
It's what I've come to expect.
Yeah,
very on brand.
I just throw stuff out there, and let other people refine it.
Rescue us, Aaron.
Yeah, you got anything?
Yeah, I think the opening closing statement thing, the opening scene, Olive is watching the pageant. She's mimicking the reactions, the things that these pageant participants are doing. And even there, you see the reflection even in her glasses. So she's just reflecting kind of what you're saying, like the way that we have these kind of, I don't know, high-minded things that we look up to as a culture, and we say they're valuable. And so in some ways, she's just parroting things that she thinks she's supposed to. And I think the closing statement of the movie is, and with the statement earlier that, life is just one pageant after another. I think the closing statement is life. Like, it's almost like you can't just check out of the pageants. Like you will be in them, you will participate, but be you through them. Like, don't just conform to, don't just parrot like what came before you, or trying to mimic who you think you're supposed to be, to be a winner, to not be a loser. Like something I said earlier, it's almost like it's trying to say, like, the winners are the ones who can navigate this thing and still be themselves, still be true to themselves, that kind of idea.
Yeah. Yeah. And I upon reflection, one of the things I really appreciate about this movie is its setting in that child pageant world, because it shows the absurdity, right? If the message is,
right,
almost like be true to yourself, which is sort of a tried and true, almost cliched message, but it's this idea of like these outside voices come and change how you think about yourself or your circumstance. It can rob you of joy or happiness. They go in and like, it's so relatable. Like, if you're an outsider to an insider club and you feel very intently how different you are, there's a part of you that wants to fit in, wants to be, in alignment. And, Olive and the whole Hoover family is so clearly not that. And you see them try, and then it's completely unsuccessful as it develops. And then you see them in very obvious, kind of provocative ways, blow that up. But it shows, like, why do we care what some creepy pageant people think? Who are these people? Why are we going to get stressed out that they don't approve of us? And then they, do the whole super freak, whatever crazy dance thing. And then what are the consequences? They go home.
They can't ever enter.
Right. They can never enter it again.
In a beauty pageant in California.
Right. So it invites you to consider like why all the angsting over desiring their approval when their approval or disapproval ultimately doesn't matter.
Right.
And so I'll use this as a convenient segue into these gospel applications, because I think the gospel application here is obvious, right? For me, and you guys can speak to your thing, but I'm going to keep going in the train of thought of that's framed a certain way from a Christian perspective. We burn so much energy and so much like angst and desire of wanting to receive the approval of the equivalent of the,
it's equally absurd.
It's equally absurd, right? And we care so much, and there's either the pressure to conform. So like in this Christian way of seeing it, we either, don't eat the ice cream, make the kid dress up in creepy ways, put all these pressure to like look and fit in with this really creepy subculture, to be basically invisible or to go along, or we kind of retain our otherness and don't fit in, but we can't. If you stay stuck on obsessing over not fitting in, it's only going to drive discontentment and unhappiness. And they find freedom in just getting on that stage and dancing, and because they don't care anymore.
Right.
And it's also like I found myself reflecting on Dwayne's perspective of basically life is one pageant after another, and basically F it all and just stay true to yourself. And that's, I think, appealing on the surface. And that's something our culture celebrates.
Right.
And I think it's something people wish was true. And you can say that, and you can wear the slogan on your t-shirt, and you can live that way. But the fact of the matter is our hearts we can aspire to that, but we can't. Very few people are truly lacking self-awareness. And those people tend to be kind of psycho, very, not the easiest people to live with.
Yeah.
Right. There is something about an awareness of each other. And from a Christian perspective, we're called not to conform to the world. We're called not to care what the beauty pageant thinks, but we're also not called to just total self-definition or
you don't just check out.
I only care what I think,
right.
and I don't care what the haters think. And you don't just check out. Like, so in that gap, like if you don't have something to orient under and around and conform to,
right.
in that black hole is only selfishness. And so it's not, Dwayne's answer is not the right answer either. And I think the movie wants that to be the right answer,
right.
but I think it's setting up whoever's adhering to that to self-absorption. And ironically, almost in a way of how Dwayne is at the beginning of the film.
Right, yeah.
And so the Christian way, and I think the gospel calls us to that third way of resisting conformity, but also seeking and being aware of others to serve and to love, but not have to crave their acceptance because you have the ultimate acceptance. So I'll step off my soapbox on that one, but...
Yeah, I mean, I think that is kind of the main way to take it.
That's why I went first.
No, it is good. Well, and one of the things that I was thinking while you were saying that is that it's funny because in our culture we do kind of celebrate this like, oh, I'm not the mainstream type. But you said something like you wear the shirt. It's just funny because there are going to be shirts, whatever you're not. It's like you're not the first one that's done that. That's gone against, that has said. Whatever, beauty pageants are dumb. Like even thinking beauty pageants are dumb is kind of cliche now, because it's like because we don't like fake things. So now everybody hates fake things and we're all above that now. But it's just funny because we're not at all, but it's the kind of turnaround thing. It's just the same thing happens over and over. So I definitely get that. And yeah, it's funny how we can get like sucked into doing the exact same thing, but it maybe on the other side is just the pendulum swinging back and forth. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I agree. I don't know if I would, I'm trying to think of, I guess I didn't really get that's what the movie was saying, but I guess now that I'm thinking about it, I don't know what else it would be saying. So I do think it kind of is. I think part of what I got out of it, or just, and you touched on this, but just how ridiculous those things are. And even though you see this family and the family is ridiculous, what they're, you get to the beauty pageant and this thing that they've been trying to get to this whole time. And that is just ultra ridiculous. And that is kind of the world that we live in. I mean, it's not that far off from that in kind of a sad way. So yeah. And applying that, I think I'm kind of talking backwards to everything that you were just saying, so I'll probably just stop. But I think I like the gospel interpretation of basically just the weak will become strong, or like in our weakness we are strong, and like it's I'm forgetting all of the things now, but like the meek will inherit the earth. I'm like, there's all these.
It's in the back
something
somewhere.
About this, like, if you want to, man, like, is it the meeps?
That's the meeps.
The meeps. What is that one again?
Oh my gosh. Like if you want to be great in the kingdom of heaven, you have to be a servant to all type of thing. So I like that idea, and just like childlike faith. That really resonates with me. I don't know. I really like that.
Yeah, and you see that in, like you're describing, Olive being willing to like lay down the pageant to just sit there with her brother and comfort him.
Yeah. Yeah, because she's not looking at this bigger thing of, I'm going to be a failure if I don't go to this pageant, and this is something that I have to do to prove to myself or to prove to my dad that I'm not a loser. In that moment, all that goes away, and she kind of has this tunnel vision of, my brother's having a hard time, and I'm just going to go sit with them. Mm-hmm. Which is, it's just really sweet. And I think that, that's like Jesus going to, whenever he goes and weeps with Lazarus's family, it's like that thing of just going and being with somebody and grieving with them is really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with both those threads, and I do think the gospel thread you pulled out, Tim, is one of the main ones. I do think there's also a small thread of something we've already touched on, but that this idea that like the kingdom comes in small ways. Mm-hmm. Like we tend to be drawn to these grand gestures, grand movements. But I think something that this movie demonstrates, like her sitting there with him when different family members have tried, or the dad, he really wants to. I think he loves his family. He cares about them. He wants to save them through like this book deal and kind of his success in this motivational speaker world. But ultimately, it's him getting on a stage and dancing with his daughter that kind of like brings the family together. Yeah. It's not obviously that doesn't pay bills. It's not an ultimate solution, but it kind of brings this glue to the family in a way that the mom's been craving, Cheryl. And just them all getting, and so it's like this idea that the kingdom comes through a mustard seed. It comes through yeast, like just like in small ways. God's people not checking out, but being engaged in the world. Like they bring about the kingdom, and it's not necessarily like most of us will never do the big grand things, and those things are part of the kingdom, but that's not going to be most of our stories. Yeah. And it is just us sitting with people and dancing with them, metaphorically, maybe literally, yeah. But yeah, I appreciated that about this movie as well.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I was gonna not talk about this, but it's our podcast and it can be as long as it wants. So we're already over our normal time, so we might as well just roll with it. And this is more of a stray thought, but as I was watching it, because unlike you guys, I did my homework, and I think I watched this like 3 or 4 times. Yeah. And during one of those viewings, it just occurred to me that in a lot of ways, Richard, in his almost mindless recounting of the 9 rules, he was so bought into this program, reminded me of that like religious Christian who isn't necessarily like pursuing this relationship with God, but is bought into like a rule-based religious way. And all the things that the family rolls their eyes at him, it's because he is shoehorning everything through his framing and paradigm, and he's not listening to them. Right. He's not caring about them. He is trying to promote his system, his rules, and he's trying to convince people that his rules are good and that his rules will lead you from being a loser to a winner. And he shoehorns it in awkwardly into conversations when people don't want it. And I'm just like, this sounds familiar. And like, I know this guy. And because it's not, I think he believes it.
Right.
I don't think he's that cynically thinking it's snake oil. I think he believes it, and I think he thinks it'll help people. Yeah, he does. But it's not rooted in loving people. He wants people to adopt it because he wants to grow his brand, or he wants to be, have a successful book. It's not ultimately rooted in love, and it's not ultimately. I think anyone who would watch that, no one's thinking those 9 rules is truly going to change anybody. We all know self-help stuff, and I'm not saying some people don't like it or find value in it, but for the most part, we are skeptical around those kind of things.
Yeah, and he's a ridiculous character.
And he's a ridiculous character.
You're not supposed to look at him and think he has the answer. Yeah.
But I like what you said, Aaron, because there is this little taste of redemption where he's not lecturing about those 9 rules when he gets on stage. Right. And that's a picture of him putting that aside and actually maybe applying, I don't know what his 9 rules exactly were, but you know what I mean? Yeah. It's a lived thing. It's an act of love rather than a lecture driving someone to rules. Right. And I think there's a lesson there I think Christians can, not all Christians, not all churches, not all ways, but that type sadly felt familiar.
Well, and just even using it as a platform, like whenever he's saying like, "Oh, sarcasm is what losers," because he's calling his super successful brother-in-law, a loser, and it's like there's in no way. I mean, he kind of fell from his, from grace, but like Frank is way more successful in every single way, basically.
And just try to commit suicide. So
Right.
that's not exactly a sensitive, loving thing.
Yeah,
Don't listen to that loser.
You don't get any points for. You don't get any points for like making fun of the guy.
Yeah, kicking a guy when he's down. And
Right.
Frank was being a little saucy, but like,
Right.
but that's what, when you act that way, you provoke that response.
Right. Yeah.
And it's not persecution. It's you being kind of a blockhead or, just.
Yeah. Well, and he's taking something ridiculous and using it to condescend to somebody who actually is being less ridiculous than he is. And I find that relatable. You can see that a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just by kind of following those rules. And I what you were saying too about the small things, that is one thing that I really liked about this movie was a lot of the big things that happen to them, like whenever she first goes into Frank's room at the beginning, and whenever Dwayne has his breakdown and they figure out that the grandpa died. Whenever that's happening, there's no music or anything. And like whenever they find out the grandpa died, there's like this infomercial of like a turkey baster or something playing. And it made me think about how whenever we have those moments, you want it to feel like a movie, like you want it to feel like this really big thing is happening, but it's not. That's not how real life works. Like real life is, you're in the car and then the thing that you've been wanting for your whole life, you just all of a sudden discover that you can't have it, or they wake up and then their grandpa doesn't wake up and then they're sitting in this just tiny, nowhere ER and he's dead and they're like listening, in the background there's this thing and and the doctor is like being all consoling and then he yells for he's like, nurse, he's like, Linda, it's just, I don't know. And that's the way that life is like those moments never are. And so it is this, just the idea of like, I had those two ideas tied in my head a second ago, but I think just the little things of like life just happens the way that it happens, and we want it to be grand, but it really does come down to those little moments that feel really unspecial and unspectacular, but they are. I mean, those are big things.
Well, it brings into question what makes them special or important.
Yeah, and why do we want to see them the way that we want to see them, and yeah.
So now I got to say, I'm curious. I think it's ratings time. And so, Ian, you've notoriously been the harshest critic.
Yeah.
So the first question, if we went ahead and donuts.
Right. What are we?
Last time, what was the Lego one?
Lego bricks or piece de resistance.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Pieces de resistance. Yeah. What's our rating?
VW bugs.
Pancakes a la mode.
Oh yeah, I like that.
Scoops of ice cream.
How many scoops
of ice cream?
Would you put on this pancake a la mode?
I like. No offense, Ian, but Aaron's is way better.
That's fair.
Okay. So how many scoops on this pancake of a film?
Well, if I can go back and retroact my rating, I want to give the Lego movie a 4.5 stars. And
so you can rate this one.
If I do that, then I also want to give this 4.5 stars.
Okay.
Because they're very different, but I think I liked them both. I will say maybe this isn't surprising, but I was much more moved by this movie than I was by the Lego movie. Maybe that's not surprising at all, but I was genuinely moved a lot of times by this movie, and I think I'm still kind of processing it. So I'm interested to think about why that is exactly. So yeah, I really liked it. I'll give it 4.5. Whatever we're doing, ice cream scoops. Yeah.
Okay. So what's your non-rating rating, Aaron?
I will actually give this one a rating. Because I definitely enjoyed it. I also think that it's a movie for all its merit that like it does have like it has some harsh language, has some harsh subject matter, and that I think people could be sensitive to, and that's a fine thing. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but. I guess like me trying to be a responsible person. I don't know why. I'm just taking this on, but I would give it like a 3.5. I think it's, I really enjoy it. I think the acting is incredibly well done. But I think in terms of if I am like affecting what people would watch, I would want
fair,
them.
yeah.
I would want them to know, like, I think it has a lot of merit, but it's not for everyone.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay.
I agree with that.
Okay. No, can't argue with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think for me, on the plus side of the ledger, it's memorable, which that sounds like faint praise, but I actually mean it as high praise. Like there's some very memorable, like the super freak scene at the end, the grandpa, Paul Dano's mute kind of thing. Like just there's some very memorable performances that stick out. I do give it. So it's unusual to be the more critical one than Ian. It's funny because I have watched this a bunch and I really liked it. And then the more I picked it apart, I thought there were bigger flaws. But then this most recent time, I'm like coming all the way through and like really synthesizing the message and really liking it again. But I think on the negative side of the ledger, it felt, I think the first half is way better than the back half. Personally, I love the setting up of the characters more than the living out of the characters. Grandpa's death is just the lack of emotion around. They just throw his bones in the back. Like he was a beloved part of that family, and then Olive was like really bonded to him.
Right.
And she shows no effects at all, and that just was weird to me.
It's odd.
Like I didn't know. I mean, his body is literally, and I know it's a comedy or a dark comedy, and it's not meant to be too dwelled on, but it just felt a little, for all these other ways, it was nuance and appreciation for kind of the human way. And then I think just the overall lack of development, like the characters at the beginning, they don't really grow or change or appreciate or anything. And who they are at the end is basically who they are at the beginning. They've just gone through this experience. So maybe they're a little tighter as a family, but it also feels fleeting. Yeah. And one of we can't go into it and we won't, but one of the questions in my notes I was going to throw out was like, where are these people in 5 years? Where are they in 15 years? Yeah, that's an interesting. I do. It's just an interesting thing to think about because there is such a lack of development, which doesn't have to be a bad thing, but I was left wanting, I think there was reason for growth and we just didn't see it. Which is a choice, and I'm not necessarily saying it has to be that way, but I don't know. It was just enough to knock it off. So I think putting all that aside, weighing it all out, I give it 4 scoops.
4 scoops?
So not quite as high as Ian. I'm not as Aaron's more sensitive to other viewers, and I'm more of a jerk. So I guess that leaves.
Does that mean I'm the biggest jerk?
Yeah, obviously.
Dang it! How does this keep happening?
We weren't going to say.
I give things low scores. I'm the jerk. I give things high scores. I'm the jerk again. I don't know.
What conclusions do you draw from that, Ian?
We've actually coordinated to so let you go first, and then we just leave you out on the limb.
No, but I think just real quick, I think I agree with you, Tim. I think the way I'm thinking about it right now is just kind of a slice of life movie because I think I didn't buy any of the takeaways or anything that they're really trying to tell you. So I think if I just kind of disregard that in my mind and it's just this is just a family, this is who they are and this is what they would do. I think barring, you made a good point about the grandpa. I think barring him dying, I think it's a pretty good representation of those types of people and how they would act in those situations. But yeah, I agree. If you're looking at it as a full story and you want them to have a character arc and all that, that doesn't really quite happen as much.
Yeah. So, that would be my response to me similar. Cause this is maybe a 3 or 4 day period.
It's so short.
The expectation of how much they would actually change, like, and I think kind of what we understand of how people change, like it is a lifetime process. And so in 10 years, I think best case, they've had kind of like a series of experiences that have like led them to some kind of like significant change. And this is one of those. But there's just from this one slice that you still don't have any kind of guarantees of like which direction they're going to go.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. I've actually been really curious about this. So this is the time we close out with recommendations.
Yeah.
And there's been some mystery and some.
So do I get to go first?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. All right. The first one that I did.
You're doing multiple? Come on.
Yeah, I told you.
You're making Aaron sweat. Aaron has one that he's.
I have one.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
All right. So the first one that I just stole from IMDb, but I thought it was pretty good, was Juno, and I really like Juno.
Okay,
I really like that movie a lot, and it has the same kind of dark humor.
Yeah.
It's dealing with real themes, but it does it in kind of a tongue-in-cheek type of way. So I thought that was actually pretty good. But the one that I thought of on my own was the Maywitz stories.
Okay.
And I really like that because it shows you, it has the same very real family dynamic to me, like the way that they interact, the way that they talk to each other. It felt very real to me, like it did in Little Miss Sunshine. The Maywitz stories feels very similar. And it also kind of the ridiculousness of family stuff, but how it feels really real and it feels like this big deal, but then from the outside, it looks really ridiculous. Those were that felt very similar to me. And I really like that movie too. So
I love that movie.
yeah, it's a good one.
I think it's on Netflix.
It is, yeah. At least
Noah Baumbach, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Aaron, did you take it?
No, I'm safe.
What do you got?
So mine, dark comedy. I really, like I said, thought through this movie in pairs, and I enjoyed the Frank and Dwayne pairing the most, I think, and just that silent youth, angry with kind of like an old. Frank's not the oldest person in the movie, but just with an older kind of pair who's more seasoned in life and just has been through maybe some harder things. I thought of Harold and Maude, dark comedy from the 70s.
Sure.
Teenage kid, also Vow of Silence, if I remember correctly. Who it's a very odd love story with like a 70-year-old woman, something like that. They
a younger man
and a young like an 18-year-old kid, and they bond over a funeral, I think. So it's this very dark.
You're not going to recommend this movie but you're going to recommend this other super weird sounding movie. I haven't even seen this, so I don't know if I want to from your description.
The true reason behind my low rating is this Little Miss Sunshine wasn't quite weird enough for me.
Okay.
Less beauty pageants, more funerals.
More funerals.
Yeah,
so.
if they had gone to a funeral, would you like?
Oh yeah. There's no funeral. They just put the dad in the back, the grandpa in the back, and But yeah, Harold and Maude.
I always think of There's Something About Mary when I think of Harold and Maude. Mary thinks it's the preeminent love story of our time.
Yeah, I mean, she's not wrong.
I had a few. I'm like Ian. I'll cheat. First, I appreciate Paul Dano's performance in this movie and would recommend, if you do like him, which I know not everyone does, but Love and Mercy. It's a movie. It's a Brian Wilson. He plays, I believe, the young Brian Wilson, and it's looks at the recording of I think Pet Sounds, and it's young Brian Wilson. Beach Boys Brian Wilson, and then. John Cusack plays the older Brian Wilson, and it's I usually don't like biopics, and this is not just here's Brian Wilson's life. It camps out in some interesting places and depicts it that way. And so I would definitely recommend that if you're into Alan Arkin. I mentioned earlier he was in Argo and was nominated again.
He's pretty great.
He's pretty. It's a very similar role. I think is why. Not as profane, but if you like the Alan Arkin voice and experience and vibe, you can scratch that itch in Argo. Abigail Breslin, who's Olive, I will always find space in this podcast. Just so you guys know, I'm giving you fair warning. I will always lonely and by my lonesome advocate full-throatedly for Signs. I am probably the foremost fan in the world of M. Night Shyamalan's Signs. I love that movie. I know everyone hates it, and I will fight everyone to the death over the validity of that movie. And that's Abigail Breslin's feature debut. That's her first movie. She plays a little girl who's always putting water out.
Mm-hmm.
So that's her. That's her first movie. So any way I can connect a movie we do to Signs, I'm going to recommend Signs. But my real recommendation is a a small movie. I don't even know how well known because I'm so sophisticated in deep cuts. Yeah, The Dark Knight. It's a movie called Captain Fantastic. Have you guys heard of it?
I've seen the trailers on Netflix.
Yeah, Viggo Mortensen's plays his dad. And the reason I draw a comparison is he's the dad and they're off the grid. They're homeschooled and like live in the woods and are very... But that same family vibe, and then they go. Yeah, I don't want to give too much away, but they end up taking a trip together in a very similar way as the Little Miss Sunshine. Okay. You know, not necessarily the horn malfunctioning or whatnot, but it's this family dynamics thing, and combined with travel, and it's a small indie kind of movie. And so, if you've liked this movie, it's maybe some of the rougher edges are not in Captain Fantastic, although there is some weirdness. I don't want to give it away, but there's some weirdness. But especially if you appreciate the treatment of the grandpa in this movie, I don't want to give too much away, but it'll be right up your alley. So to anyone who actually stuck through, I don't even want to know. We're definitely probably over the hour and a half mark, but you have our gratitude and thanks. Yeah. And for next time, we will be continuing our look and appreciation and discussion of Stan Grossman.
You're flipping through the channels late at night, looking for a movie. Yeah, you're doing it right. Called up Tim, I called up Ian. I wanted to know, which movie are we seeing? Cause some make you laugh and some make you cry. I wanna know, are your thoughts like mine?
For the love of the frame. Love of the frame. For the love of the frame. Love of the frame. For the love of the frame. Love of the frame. For the love of the frame. Love of the frame. For the love of the frame. Love of the frame.